The unlikely protector Ethan sat alone in the dimly lit cockpit of the small spacecraft, staring out at the endless stretch of space. His mission had seemed simple enough: escort a cargo ship carrying alien refugees across the galaxy. A routine job, nothing out of the ordinary. But that had all changed when the attack came. The enemy ships appeared without warning, their sleek, dark forms cutting through the cold emptiness of space. They moved fast, faster than anything had seen before. The cargo ship's hull shuddered as blasts of energy slammed into it, causing alarms to blare throughout the ship. Ethan quickly grabbed his blaster, his mind racing. He needed to protect the refugees. The cargo ship had no weapons, no shields, and no way to defend itself against the assault. He had to act fast. He hit the button to open the hatch and rushed out, sprinting down the narrow corridor toward the cargo hold. His boots clattered on the metal floor, the noise echoing in the silence of the ship. The door to the hold was already open, and he found himself face to face with chaos. The refugees, alien beings from a dozen different planets, were panicking, running in all directions. But Ethan's eyes were drawn to one specific place: a small, terrified alien child, huddled in the corner, clutching a stuffed toy for comfort. The ship shook again, the sound of explosions growing louder. Ethan's heart raced as he rushed toward the child, who was crying softly. He knelt down beside her, trying to keep his voice calm. "Hey, it's going to be okay," he said, reaching out a hand. "We'll get you to safety." But the child didn't respond, her big, glowing eyes wide with fear. Ethan couldn't blame her. He didn't know how to stop the attack. He didn't even know who was attacking them. All he could do was protect her, keep her safe as long as he could. Just then, the ship's intercom crackled to life, a voice filling the room. It was the captain, but there was panic in his voice. "We're losing power," the captain shouted. "The shields are down. Brace for impact." Before Ethan could react, the ship lurched violently, throwing him forward. He slammed into the wall, feeling the breath knock out of him. The emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the whole. Ethan struggled to his feet, his mind racing. He could hear the sounds of the enemy ships getting closer. He had to make a decision. Without thinking, he grabbed the child and lifted her into his arms. She was so small, so fragile in his grasp, but the desperation in her eyes gave him no choice. The ship was falling apart, and he had to get her off of it. Now. Ethan sprinted toward the escape pod, using his free hand to punch in the launch code. The door hissed open, revealing the small, cramped space inside. He had no time to think about his own safety. His only focus was getting the child away from the destruction. He climbed into the pod, cradling the child close to his chest as the door slammed shut behind them. The pod's engines roared to life, and the ship's hull gave one final, sickening groan before the pod shot out into the cold vacuum of space. Ethan held his breath as they shot away from the doomed ship. He glanced over at the child, who had stopped crying. Her wide eyes were fixed on him, but she said nothing. She seemed calm, almost too calm for someone who had just been through such a terrifying ordeal. The pod drifted in the blackness of space, its small engines barely keeping it moving. Ethan sat back, letting out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The danger was momentarily over, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much bigger than he had expected. As the stars blinked around them, Ethan looked down at the child in his arms. She was still silent, but there was something in her gaze, something that told him she wasn't just any alien child. There was a mystery to her, something deep and hidden. But before he could dwell on it, the comm system crackled to life again. This time, it wasn't the captain's voice. It was something else, something darker, colder. "Return the child," the voice said, each word clear and sharp. "You have no idea what you're holding, human. Give her back or there will be consequences." Ethan's blood ran cold as the weight of the situation crashed down on him. Who was this voice? And why did it want the child so badly? His mind raced, but there was no answer, only the cold silence of space. The child's soft, steady breathing was the only sound that kept Ethan grounded. But as the voice echoed in his mind, he knew this was only the beginning. Whatever was coming next, it was far worse than anything he had ever faced before, and now he had to protect her at all costs. The mysterious mother Ethan barely had time to catch his breath before a strange, unsettling noise filled the pod, a low, almost rhythmic hum. The small craft shook ever so slightly, as if some unseen force was tugging at it from the void of space. He looked at the child, still cradled in his arms, her expression unreadable but intense. There was something about her, something that didn't quite fit. She had the wide, innocent eyes of a child, but her gaze carried the weight of a much older soul. The hum grew louder, and Ethan's pulse quickened. It wasn't coming from the pod. It was coming from the communication system. The display blinked to life, revealing an encrypted message. "Unknown transmission," the AI voice declared. "Decoding." Ethan's hands shook as he instinctively checked the emergency controls, searching for any sign of danger. He could feel the tension in his chest, a knot of uncertainty tightening with every passing second. Who would be contacting him now? The attack on the cargo ship had left everything in chaos, and the last thing he needed was another problem. Then, as if the universe had decided to throw him another curveball, the screen flickered, and a holographic image materialized before him. His breath caught in his throat. It was a woman, a figure made of shimmering light, her features sharp and defined. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly energy, piercing through the space around her. "Return her." "Human," the woman's voice echoed, cold and commanding. "You do not know what you have taken." Ethan's heart raced. He wasn't sure if it was the unexpected appearance or the weight of her words, but something about her was unsettling. This was no ordinary transmission. This was personal. "Who are you?" Ethan managed to ask, his voice tight, though he could barely conceal his rising anxiety. The woman's eyes, glowing bright blue like a star's core, narrowed. "I am the mother of the child you have stolen, and I am her protector." The words hit Ethan like a slap in the face. The mother? But she had been killed in the attack, hadn't she? The explosion had taken down her ship, and he hadn't seen anyone escape. Yet here this figure stood, speaking as though she were untouched by the chaos that had just unfolded. The woman's lips curled into something resembling a smile, though it was devoid of warmth. "You think you saved her, but you have only placed her in more danger. They will come for her, and they will not stop until they get what they want, and they will stop at nothing." Ethan stiffened. "Who are they?" He wanted to ask, but before the words could escape, the woman continued. "Do you have any idea what she is?" "No, of course not. She's not merely a child. She's the key to something far more significant than you can imagine, and now you're holding her like a helpless, insignificant relic. You are playing with forces beyond your comprehension." Ethan's grip tightened around the child, feeling her small body shift slightly in his arms. Her breathing had become steady, almost too steady for someone so young. The calmness in her only made him more uneasy. He couldn't explain it, but he felt something deep within him, an invisible thread connecting him to her, something that tugged at him, urging him to protect her at all costs. "Why didn't you protect her?" Ethan asked, his voice rough with the weight of his frustration. "Why leave her in the hands of those who would destroy everything?" The figure's gaze softened, though there was a darkness in her eyes. "I have my reasons, human. But the truth is, I wasn't the one meant to protect her. You were." The words struck him like a thunderclap. "Me? You are her guardian now," the woman continued, her tone now more intense. "But you must understand, you are not alone. You are part of a greater design. There are forces at play that you can't even begin to fathom. The child you hold, she is part of the balance. Without her, the very fabric of the universe could collapse. The hologram flickered, its light shimmering as though struggling to maintain its form. The woman's face began to distort, the image glitching as if the transmission was failing. But before it cut out entirely, she gave Ethan one final haunting piece of advice. Trust no one, not even me. But do not let her fall into their hands. If you do, it will be the end of everything you know. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Ethan in a silent, oppressive stillness. The child in his arms shifted again. Her eyes wide and blank, like she had heard the entire exchange and yet wasn't truly part of it. She looked at him, unblinking, as if awaiting his next move. Ethan sat frozen, trying to process the impossible conversation he had just had. What the hell was that? His mind raced, but no answers came. He had always been a soldier, trained to follow orders, to survive. But now nothing made sense. The child he held wasn't just an alien refugee. She was a key to something unimaginable. And he was tied to her fate. The stars outside the pod's window gleamed coldly, their light distant and indifferent. And in that moment, Ethan knew he wasn't just running from the attackers. He was running from something far bigger. And there was no turning back. The alien's secret. The days passed in a blur. Ethan sat by the pod's control panel, gazing out into the blackness of space. The silence was deafening. The child had been mostly quiet since the transmission, her big, luminous eyes following him. Whenever he moved, but she never spoke. It was unnerving how calm she was, considering what they had just survived. Most children, human or otherwise, would have been hysterical by now, crying, asking questions, demanding explanations. But this one, she said nothing. Ethan was torn between his duty to protect her and the growing sense of unease in his gut. The mysterious woman, her mother, as she had claimed, had left him with more questions than answers. Who was she really? What did she mean when she said, "You were meant to protect her"? And why had she been so cryptic about the child's importance? The small pod drifted, a mere speck in the vastness of space, its engines humming softly. They had no destination, no plan. He had sent out a distress signal, but there was no response. He was on his own. Then one morning, something happened that changed everything. Ethan woke to the sound of soft rustling. For a moment, he thought it was just the hum of the pod systems, but then he heard it again, a quiet, breathless whisper. "Do you want to know what I am?" Ethan froze, his heart hammering in his chest. He turned, half expecting to see the child sitting there, staring at him with her usual, unblinking eyes. But no, this time, she was different. Her eyes were glowing a soft, eerie blue, like the faintest hint of a star coming to life in the void. Her voice was soft, but there was a depth to it, something beyond her apparent age. He slowly knelt down, never taking his eyes off her. "What are you talking about?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "What do you mean by—" "I'm not just a child," she interrupted, her voice clearer now. "I am part of something much older, something far more dangerous." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The child was speaking now, not in the soft, frightened whispers he'd grown used to, but with a strange, chilling certainty. "I don't understand," Ethan said, his voice barely a whisper. "What are you? What's going on?" The child's expression softened as if she was pitying him, but her eyes remained unnaturally still. "I am part of the Arcalian project," she said, her voice low and heavy with significance. "I was born from the fragments of an ancient alien race, the Arcalians. We were scattered across the galaxy, pieces of something bigger, something ancient, that was almost destroyed." Ethan's mind raced. Arcalian? He had never heard of such a race. Was this some kind of joke? Or was this child truly as important as the woman in the transmission had claimed? "What does that mean?" Ethan asked, the words escaping his mouth. Before he could stop them. Why are you here? Why are they hunting you? Her lips trembled as she looked up at him, her small face filled with sorrow. The Archalians were wiped out by those who feared us. But a few of us survived, scattered. Over time we were hunted down, one by one. I was hidden, protected, until I could become what I am now. Ethan knelt beside her, his heart beating louder in his chest. What are you becoming? The child looked up at him, her expression unreadable. I don't know, but I'm close. When I was born, they thought I was a gift, a weapon, a key. Ethan's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles turning white. A weapon? Who wants you? She didn't answer right away, her gaze flickering toward the viewport, her eyes distant, as if seeing something beyond the stars. Then finally, she spoke, the Council of Shadows. They're the ones who attacked your ship, Ethan. They're the ones who have been hunting me. The words hit Ethan like a cold slap to the face. The Council of Shadows? He had never heard of them. Who were they? Why did they want the child? Why would they want you? He asked, his voice shaky. What could you possibly be to them? The child's eyes glowed brighter now, almost as though they were reflecting the very stars around them. I am the key to their power. I was created to unlock the energy of the ether crystals. The crystals are the most powerful source of energy in the universe. With them, you can reshape galaxies, control time, and even destroy entire worlds. Ethan could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. He had always known space was filled with dangers, with dark forces lurking in the shadows. But this was something far beyond anything he had ever imagined. The child he had saved, the one he thought was just a scared, innocent refugee, was something far more dangerous. The pod shuddered, interrupting his thoughts. He quickly checked the instruments, but everything seemed normal. Still, the feeling of being watched crept over him. He wasn't alone. The child's gaze shifted again, her expression unreadable. They will come for me soon. You will have to decide, Ethan. Will you protect me, or will you let them have what they want? The silence in the pod was deafening. Ethan could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, the weight of an entire universe on his shoulders. The child wasn't just an innocent. She was a key to unimaginable power, and with that power came a responsibility that was almost too much to bear. Are you ready? The child whispered, her voice carrying an edge of finality. Ethan didn't answer immediately. His mind raced, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked at her, this strange ancient being who had been thrust into his life without warning. And then, finally he made a decision. I'll protect you, he said, his voice steady, no matter what it takes. The child looked at him for a moment, her glowing eyes softening. Then she nodded. Then we have little time, they're coming. Ethan stood up, his hands steady as he gripped the controls. The future of the galaxy now rested in his hands, and he didn't know what the next move would bring. But he knew one thing, this was only the beginning. Chased across the galaxy, Ethan's hand tightened around the controls as the pod cruised through the cold expanse of space. The rhythmic hum of the engines was the only sound that filled the cabin, a stark contrast to the chaos in his mind. The child, still silent, sat beside him, her eyes locked on the stars outside, as though she could see something beyond the ordinary cosmos. A distant part of him wanted to believe that they could escape, just slip into the unknown, hide away in some corner of the galaxy. Maybe he could find a way to keep her safe. Maybe they could disappear, let the madness fade into the depths of space. But deep down, he knew that wasn't going to happen. The Council of Shadows was coming, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. Ethan had tried to contact the nearest space station, to warn them and find allies, but the transmission had been blocked. Someone somewhere was making sure no help was coming. It was as if the entire universe was in on the conspiracy to keep the child from escaping. No matter where he went, There was nowhere safe. We can't outrun them forever, Ethan muttered, mostly to himself. The child's eyes turned toward him, her expression unreadable. No, but we can try. Her calm demeanor unnerved him. But it also made him feel a bit of the burden lift from his shoulders. There was something about her, something more powerful than he could understand, that kept him grounded. In a way, she wasn't just the key to everything. She was his anchor in the storm. Suddenly, the pod jolted violently, throwing Ethan forward in his seat. He slammed into the dashboard, the lights flickering as the ship trembled. The child's gaze snapped up, her face glowing brighter as she instinctively grabbed Ethan's arm. "Hold on," she cried, her voice sharp, cutting through the panic that had settled into Ethan's bones. Ethan quickly pulled himself back into the seat, his hands grasping the controls. The pod was shaking, rattling like a leaf in a storm. He could see the emergency lights flicker on, and alarms blared in his ears. But what he noticed next sent a cold shiver down his spine. The stars outside the viewport were moving. No, not the stars, ships. A small fleet of dark vessels was closing in on them from every angle. They were sleek, almost ghostly in appearance, their dark hulls blending into the vastness of space. Their engines hummed with a low, terrifying power, and Ethan could feel the weight of their presence even before they reached them. "Hold on," he whispered under his breath, pressing the thrusters to full power, but it was too late. The Council of Shadows had found them. The ship surrounded the pod in a perfect circle, cutting off any chance of escape. Ethan's eyes darted between the controls, searching for a way out, but there was none. Every option was blocked. He had nowhere to go. One of the ships broke formation, moving toward them slowly, deliberately. It was larger than the others, its hull adorned with strange, glowing symbols, ancient symbols that Ethan had never seen before. He could feel the child's gaze upon him, her silent presence beside him like a weight on his chest. "There. Here," she whispered. "They've come." Ethan's pulse quickened. The fleet's leader was preparing to board, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The massive ship's engines roared, sending out waves of energy that rattled the pod, knocking it off course. He fought to keep it steady, but the gravitational pull from the larger ship was too strong. The pod was dragged toward it like a leaf caught in a storm's wind. "I won't let them take you," Ethan muttered, gripping the controls tightly. His fingers were white with the pressure, but there was no escape, no way out. The overwhelming power of the enemy fleet left him feeling small, helpless. His only hope was to hold on long enough to find an opening, something, anything that could give them a chance. But the opportunity never came. The ship that had approached them now released a shuttle, its sleek form darting toward the pod like a predatory bird zeroing in on its prey. The shuttle's engines roared, and before Ethan could react, it was upon them. A dark, armored figure emerged from the craft, silhouetted by the harsh glow of the shuttle's exhaust. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary soldier. The figure was tall, wearing full combat armor that reflected the pod's emergency lights. The helmet was smooth, featureless, but Ethan could feel the presence behind it, a sense of calculation, of purpose, like a predator stalking its prey. "I told you," the child whispered, her voice calm yet knowing. "They don't stop. Not until they have me." The figure floated outside the pod, their hand raised. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, as the shuttle hovered in place. Then, the hatch of the pod opened with a hiss. The armored figure floated inside, gliding effortlessly through the air. Ethan scrambled to his feet, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. But the figure held up a hand. "Don't bother," the figure said in a voice that was cold, almost metallic. "You won't survive this." "No one survives the council." The words stung, but Ethan refused to show fear. He took a deep breath and steadied his stance. He wouldn't give up without a fight. The child, however, was far from afraid. She looked at the figure with a calmness that unsettled Ethan. There was something in her gaze, something that told him she knew what was coming next. This isn't the end, she said, her voice soft but powerful. You will regret this. The figure paused, as if considering her words, before a dark chuckle escaped their lips. We regret nothing, they replied. But you will. In that moment, the full weight of what Ethan was up against settled in. This was no ordinary battle. This was the beginning of a war not just for the child's survival, but for the fate of the galaxy itself. And Ethan was caught in the middle, with no way out. A desperate alliance, the pod drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space, its engines humming softly as if trying to calm the chaos that had unfolded in the past few hours. Ethan's hands still gripped the controls, though he had no idea where he was going anymore. It didn't matter. The Council of Shadows had nearly caught them once, and they would try again. He could feel it in his bones. The child sat beside him, her unblinking gaze fixed on the stars outside, her small form oddly calm in the face of the impending storm. Ethan couldn't understand how she remained so composed. Was she simply resigned to her fate, or was there something more to her than he realized? Every moment with her made him question everything he thought he knew about the universe. Ethan glanced over at her, his thoughts running in every direction. We're not going to make it, are we? He muttered, more to himself than to her. The weight of their situation pressed down on him like a heavy, unrelenting hand. Every time he thought there might be a way out, every time he thought he could protect her, the forces against them seemed to grow stronger, more inevitable. To his surprise, the child spoke, her voice soft but filled with a strange strength. We will make it, but not the way you expect. Ethan turned to her, confused. What do you mean? I know what you're thinking, human. You think you're alone, that you're the only one who can protect me. Her eyes, glowing faintly, locked onto his. But you're not. You have allies. You just don't know it yet. Ethan frowned, trying to make sense of her words. Allies? He hadn't seen anyone. Who could help them? Not after the attack, not after everything that had happened. He had no friends in the galaxy, just enemies. And the cold vacuum of space. Before he could respond, the pod's communication system beeped, breaking the silence that had settled in the cabin. Ethan's hand instinctively reached for the console. His heart skipped a beat as the screen flickered to life, revealing a distorted transmission. The image was blurry at first, but then it cleared, showing a face that was unmistakably alien, tall, thin, and with glowing purple eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness of space. The figure on the screen didn't waste time with pleasantries. I know you're there, the figure said, its voice low and deliberate. And I know what you're carrying. Ethan froze. His pulse quickened. Another enemy or a potential ally? It wasn't clear, but the words struck a chord. They knew about the child, which meant they knew far more than Ethan had realized. I don't know who you are, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the anxiety gnawing at him. But I'm not interested in making deals. The figure's lips twitched into a semblance of a smile, but it didn't reach the coldness in their eyes. I'm not here to make a deal, human, the figure replied. But you need help, and I can provide it. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Why should I trust you? The alien leaned forward slightly, as if sensing the distrust radiating from him. Because we have a common enemy, the Council of Shadows. I've been tracking them for years, and I've been waiting for someone like you to come along. Ethan's mind raced. Another ally, or another trap? He couldn't afford to make the wrong choice. But the fact that this alien knew about the Council and was offering help, that was a glimmer of hope he hadn't dared to entertain until now. What do you want? Ethan asked cautiously. I want the child. Not for the reasons you think, the figure said, their voice taking on a more serious tone. You don't understand yet, but she is key to stopping the Council. If you don't give her to me, they will destroy everything. I'm not asking for your loyalty, human. I'm offering you a chance to survive." Ethan's fingers tightened on the console. He knew the stakes were high, but the idea of handing over the child felt like a betrayal. He had promised to protect her, no matter the cost. But then the child's voice broke through his thoughts. "You don't have to give me up," she said softly, her eyes glowing with an intense, knowing light. "He's telling the truth." Ethan turned to look at her, his expression a mix of confusion and disbelief. "You trust him?" She nodded, her small hand reaching up to gently touch his arm. "I don't know him, but I know what he can do." "You need him, Ethan. We all do." The alien's voice interrupted them again. "The council will stop at nothing to get her. You're running out of time. If you want to stop them, you have to act now. I can help you, but only if you accept." The silence in the pod was suffocating. Ethan felt torn, the weight of his duty and the responsibility he had taken on for the child pressing down on him. If this alien could truly help them, it could mean their only chance of survival. But could he trust them? His mind flashed back to the earlier transmission from the child's mother. "Trust no one, not even me." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision on his shoulders. There was no way out of this without a leap of faith. Finally he spoke, his voice steady but uncertain. "Okay, I'll trust you. For now." The alien smiled this time. The smile reached their eyes. "Good choice, human. Prepare for coordinates. I'll be sending you a location. Follow it, and I'll meet you there. Together we will stop the council." Before Ethan could reply, the screen flickered and went dark, the transmission cutting off as abruptly as it had begun. The child looked up at him, her eyes now reflecting something more than just the void of space. There was a determination in them, something that reminded Ethan of the very reason he had risked everything to protect her. "What happens now?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "We fight," she whispered, her voice calm, "and we win." Ethan didn't know what the future held or how this strange alliance would play out. But one thing was certain, they were no longer alone. The fight was far from over, and now, for the first time, they might actually have a chance. The ultimate betrayal, the pod's engines hummed steadily, cutting through the dark expanse of space like a heartbeat in the void. The destination was set, and Ethan's eyes stayed locked on the navigation system, his mind barely processing the stars outside. They had made the decision. There was no turning back now. The alien who had promised them aid had given them coordinates to a hidden location. A base, a safe haven, or so they thought. The child sat silently beside him, her eyes glowing faintly, reflecting the soft light of the pod's console. There was something eerie about how still she was, like a storm waiting to break. It was impossible to ignore the deep, quiet power that seemed to radiate from her, and yet Ethan still struggled to comprehend it. But as the days passed, something about the silence started to gnaw at him. The quiet was oppressive, like a prelude to something terrible. He had made a deal with the mysterious alien, who had claimed to have knowledge of the council's operations. But now more than ever, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was being pulled deeper into a web he barely understood. Suddenly, the calmness shattered. The pod jerked violently, throwing both Ethan and the child forward. The emergency lights flickered on, bathing the small interior in a harsh red glow. Ethan's heart raced as his hands automatically gripped the controls, trying to regain control of the pod. "What's happening?" he muttered, fear creeping into his voice. The child looked up, her glowing eyes now filled with an unsettling calm. "They're here." Ethan's blood ran cold. The council? Had they found them already? The pod shook again, and this time, Ethan knew they weren't just in danger of being caught in the crossfire. They were under direct attack. Before he could react, a loud explosion rocked the pod, sending it spinning wildly. Ethan's hands flew to the control panel, trying to stabilize it, but the ship was losing power. The lights flickered, and the ship's navigation system went offline. They were blind in the dark, drifting in the midst of an unseen enemy. Through the chaos, the child's voice cut through. "We need to get out, now." He looked at her, heart pounding. "What are you talking about? We're out of options. We're caught." Her expression was one of unsettling calm. "No, we're not. But you've been betrayed." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Betrayed? By who? By the alien who had helped them, the one who promised to be their ally? "You're wrong," Ethan said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and confusion. "You're wrong. I made a deal with them. They're helping us." She shook her head slowly, her eyes not leaving his. "No, you don't understand. The one who sent you here? They're the true enemy. The Council of Shadows never wanted you to win. They never wanted the child. They wanted to control you. And now they've succeeded." Ethan's mind spun, struggling to process the gravity of her words. Betrayed. It didn't make sense. Everything he had done, everything he had risked, had been for the child's safety, for the chance to escape. But now doubt crept in like a poison, spreading through every thought, every instinct. How had he been so blind? Before he could ask more questions, a new voice broke into the silence, cold and eerily familiar. "Ethan, I'm afraid it's too late." The transmission was crystal clear, but the face that appeared on the screen was not what Ethan expected. The figure in front of him was the alien who had promised them help, the one who had provided the coordinates. The same alien who had assured him that they would be safe. But now, the figure's eyes, those bright purple eyes that had once exuded authority, were filled with something else entirely. A calm detachment, mixed with a hint of amusement. "You?" Ethan whispered, his voice cracking with the weight of disbelief. "You set us up?" The alien's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "You really thought I was here to save you, human? You were just a pawn, all along. Your child was never the key to stopping the Council. She was the weapon. A weapon that I needed to control." Ethan felt the floor fall out from beneath him. His mind raced. The deal, the promises, the supposed help they had received. It had all been a lie, a manipulation from the very beginning. He had been played by the very one he thought was his ally. The alien's voice was cold, like a final verdict. "I'm sorry, Ethan, but you've already lost. You're a fool to think you had any control over this. The Council's plans will unfold just as they always intended. The child was never yours to protect." Ethan's chest tightened, the weight of betrayal crushing him. The alien had never intended to help him. They had only wanted the child. They had used Ethan's trust, his desperation, to bring them right to where they needed them. "You." Ethan started, but words failed him. How could he have been so naive? "Now I must take the child," the alien continued, his voice filled with chilling calmness. "It's already too late to stop the Council. The galaxy will fall in line, just as it always has." Ethan's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles turning white with rage. He had been duped, used, but he wasn't about to let the child fall into their hands, not after everything they had been through. "You won't get her," Ethan growled, his voice filled with newfound determination. "Not while I'm still breathing." The alien's smile grew wider. "You really think you can stop me? You don't even understand what you're up against. You'll never win." As the transmission cut off, leaving Ethan alone with the child, the cold weight of the betrayal still hung in the air. The words echoed in his mind, but something else began to stir within him. Rage, determination, a promise he had made to protect the child. No matter what. Ethan knew what he had to do now. He was done being a pawn in someone else's game. It was time to fight back, to take control of his own destiny. He would stop the Council. He would stop the alien who had betrayed him. And no matter the cost, he would protect the child. The war was just beginning. The final stand, the stars outside the viewport of the pod were nothing but pinpricks of cold light, distant and indifferent to the chaos unfolding inside. Ethan's pulse raced in his ears as he sat at the controls, his eyes locked on the flashing red lights warning of imminent danger. The child sat quietly beside him, her eyes glowing softly, as if she were already aware of what was about to happen. The pod was heading straight into the heart of the enemy's territory. The coordinates provided by the mysterious alien had led them to a massive, abandoned space station orbiting a dying star. It was here, Ethan knew, that the final battle would take place. The alien had promised that the child's importance would be revealed, that this place would hold the key to everything, the child's past, her power, and the fate of the galaxy. But now, after everything that had happened, Ethan wasn't so sure about any of it. The Council of Shadows was closing in. The betrayal had already been set in motion. There was no turning back. "You don't have to do this," the child's voice broke through his thoughts, her tone as calm as ever, though there was a glint of something in her eyes, something he hadn't seen before. It was strength, certainty, and a touch of sorrow. "You could still walk away." Ethan's grip on the control panel tightened, his knuckles white. "I can't. You're not just some weapon. You're not theirs to control." She didn't respond immediately, as if considering his words carefully. And then, slowly she spoke, her voice filled with the weight of someone much older than her years. "You don't understand. They're right about one thing: my existence is tied to the fate of the universe. I was born from the ashes of an ancient race, a race that once ruled the stars. The ether crystals. They were created by my people, and they hold the power to reshape everything: time, space, reality itself. But I am not meant to be the key, I am the lock." Ethan's mind reeled, struggling to process her words. The lock? What did she mean? Before he could speak, the pod shook violently. The station loomed ahead, a massive decaying structure floating in space like a forgotten titan. Ethan could see the faint outline of enemy ships, dark silhouettes against the distant glow of the dying star. "They found us," the child said quietly, her eyes unwavering. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. "Then it's time to fight." The pod raced toward the station at full speed, the engines roaring as the distance closed. Ethan's mind was clear now, sharp with the focus of someone who knew they had nothing left to lose. He had promised to protect her, no matter the cost. He wasn't just going to give her up to the council. He wasn't going to let the betrayal stand. As they neared the station, a voice crackled through the pod's coms. It was the alien who had once offered to help them, the one who had betrayed him. "You're too late, human," the voice echoed, dripping with malice. "You think you can stop us? You think you can save her? The child is the key, and once we have her, we will control the galaxy. Your resistance is meaningless." Ethan's jaw clenched. He didn't respond. The time for words was over. The time for action was now. The station loomed closer, its massive docking bay opening like the jaws of a great beast, ready to swallow them whole. Ethan steered the pod straight into the docking bay, the ship shaking as they entered, debris scattering in their wake. The doors to the docking bay slammed shut behind them. The sound of metal grinding against metal echoed through the small pod, but Ethan didn't flinch. He was ready for whatever came next. The pod's emergency doors hissed open, and he grabbed the blaster at his side, his eyes scanning the dark metallic halls of the station. "We're not alone," the child whispered. Ethan could feel the tension building in the air, thick with anticipation. He had expected this. He had expected the enemy to be waiting. But as he stepped out into the cold, sterile corridor of the station, something felt different. The lights flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. The air was thick, stagnant, like the station had been abandoned for centuries. But Ethan knew better. The enemy was here. They were just waiting, watching, ready to make their move. Then, suddenly the silence was shattered by a deafening noise. The sound of boots pounding on the metal floors echoed through the corridor, growing louder with every passing second. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as he turned toward the source of the sound. A group of heavily armored soldiers appeared, their weapons raised, their eyes hidden behind dark helmets. Ethan didn't hesitate. He raised his blaster and fired, taking down the first soldier with a single shot. But the others were already moving, closing in. He ducked behind a nearby pillar, his heart pounding in his chest. The child was still by his side, her small hand gripping his arm. "Stay close," he ordered, his voice gruff. She nodded without a word, her eyes glowing brighter as she seemed to concentrate. Ethan couldn't help but glance at her in surprise. What was she doing? The soldiers were getting closer. He could hear their footsteps, the sound of their comes echoing through the corridor. But before he could react, the child stepped forward, her eyes glowing like twin stars. A pulse of energy shot from her hands, knocking the soldiers back with a force that sent them crashing into the walls. The air crackled with power, and Ethan could feel the heat from the burst of energy on his face. The child turned to him. Her expression unchanged. "This is what I am." Ethan stared at her, awe and fear mixing in his chest. This was more than he had ever imagined. The child was a weapon, a living force of nature, capable of bending reality itself. But even with this new understanding, the battle was far from over. "We have to keep moving," Ethan said, his voice hoarse with the weight of everything they had been through. "We can't stop until we get to the heart of this place." The child nodded again, and together, they moved deeper into the station. But Ethan knew, with every step they took, that the final battle was still ahead. The council would stop at nothing to take her, and now, with the child's powers fully awakened, the stakes had never been higher. As they neared the heart of the station, Ethan knew this was it. This was where everything would be decided. And he would fight to the very end for her, for the galaxy, for everything they had left.